Hey guys, good evening. I was going to talk about a lot of different things today, but I'm going to talk about something that no one was talking about last night, and I want to see if I can share this right now. I'm going to go right over here. Did we all see this? This is what Nika Mule, who, by the way, if I'm not mistaken, Jay
Yes.
forgot was still
Yes.
doing this. This is what she wore
Yes.
before going to her first game against Indiana, a game which they won, by the way. So I'm going to try to see if I can find a picture of myself that I can actually make for me to wear as a visa approved. That if I can find that shirt, I might wear it. So welcome to my fashion. I'm Steve
Yeah,
Rabinowitz.
Rabbi, you don't have any visa issues to my knowledge.
I
Do
will make
you?
sure I have
You're
a visa issue to make it. I will make
here.
sure I will fake a visa issue. Anyway, good evening. I'm Steve Rabinowitz.
And I'm Jay Kaplan, and I've never had an issue with getting my visa approved.
I'm Anthony Strait. I never had a visa picture of myself on a sweater, but I do have a necktie with my baby picture on it, so that's just as good.
Something at least. Welcome to On the Sports Lines, the conference
That'll work.
finals edition. So we wanted to party like it's 1994 today, but since this Knicks run is over, I guess we'll have to settle just with the 2024 sad version of ourselves. On today's show, it's the Final Four of the NBA, which is still a thing I hear. We also have an intriguing Final Four in that, so stay tuned. And then I'll probably do the longest rant. Okay.
So basically, you're saying we're only halfway there.
Okay, first of all,
Wow,
I would like to finish my statement here. Yes, I got it. No, that doesn't mean I have to laugh. I will also do
you
my
missed
longest.
the moment.
Yes, because my connection sucks, by the way, just to let you know. I will also probably do my longest rant ever on the 23-24 New York Knicks, otherwise known as much of a tease as that girl in school who would possibly go out with you as long as her first two choices said no, but the Garden still has that playoff revenue, baby. Let's get to the blue shirts then start off. After Chris Kreider's natural hat trick in a Game 6 in Carolina that erased all possibility of New York having two Game 7s last weekend, which would make Anthony and probably my heart probably put us in cardiac arrest. The New York Rangers made their second appearance in the conference finals in the last 3 years by winning that Game 6 a week ago. On the other side, though, is a team who's been to the conference finals in back-to-back years. They are the reigning Eastern Conference champion Florida Panthers, who have won more playoff games in the last 3 years, 25, than they did in the previous 28 seasons before that, 22. The Panthers are now on a 5-game conference finals winning streak after a 3-0 win in Game 2, which was last night. Let's look through this series through some different kinds of prisms, starting with Anthony. Give me your star watch for the Rangers going into this championship series and in Game 2 and farther.
Well, according to the series, it was definitely Vincent Trocheck. Okay, man. And you talk about the red hot streak that he had. 14 points, 6 goals, 8 assists in 10 games. The contributions outside of that, when you think about some of the plays he's been involved in, the game winning goal in Game 3 of the Carolina series in overtime, his assist to Timmy Panarin. You talking about his face-off percentage over 50%, and being that's a Sean Avery. Like, you love him when he's on your team. When he plays anywhere else, you hate his guts. And going up against his former team, the Carolina Hurricanes, just seeing him constantly chirping and jumping into the face of his one-time teammates after even the minuscule plays. I mean, it's definitely something to his personality by far, and clearly something that revved up that rallies the Rangers up without question. You think about even the comeback in Game 6 of that series. Trocheck just basically threw a wild shot on goal from a ridiculous angle that just happened to go in. He has been really a catalyst, a jumpstart the Rangers offense. And the line that he's been on has been just as important as well. And let's not forget the game-winning goal in double overtime in Game 2 of that series. Game 1 against Florida, you mentioned the Panthers being the defending Eastern Conference champions. Don't forget they're a much better team this year than the team that went to the Stanley Cup final a year ago. And it showed in Game 1. I mean, Trocheck's stat line, he was -2 with 23 minutes of ice time, 3 shots on goal. Did win 9 of his 16 faceoffs he was involved in. But let's be honest. And obviously, Jay will contribute more to this as far as outside of 5-on-5. The Rangers was stymied the entire game. I mean, it's been a while since I've seen Maxwell gone quiet during a Rangers game, and it was you could hear a pen drop for much of that game. The Florida Panthers forechecking was just smothering the Rangers. They had 11 shots on goal, 12 shots on goal through 2 periods. And the Rangers are not a high volume shooting team as it is. And then I made a joke and Jay brought it back up at the end of the game. If bad Sergei Brofsky shows up, like the Rangers' chances, the defensive trophy Brofsky showed up in Game 1. On top of the fact that he didn't really have to do a whole lot except for the third period when the Rangers just mounted a rally in the final 6.5 minutes on shots. But he was able to stop the last one of them. Look, for the Rangers to get back in the series, they got to jumpstart the offense. They have not been. This is the second straight series where they are not the superior team 5-on-5, even with the skilled players and all the speed that they have. Vision Trocheck in that line, particularly when they do get a power play, which is going. I'm gonna set this up for Jay. They've got to be a little more active as far as getting shots on net end. And Jay, I'll bring you into this conversation. The Rangers didn't have to worry about special teams in Game 1. It wasn't a whole lot to deal with as far as the power play.
Yeah, I mean, I said in our preview of the second round series that if the Rangers can keep their regular season level of special teams play, even against a top tier power play and penalty kill team like the Hurricanes, that it may not matter what happens at 5-on-5. Turns out I was correct. And because the Rangers special teams were, special, the question becomes, can they keep it going against the Panthers? The Rangers came into this series having converted at a 31.4% clip on the power play and succeeded at an 89.5% clip on the penalty kill. Second in both among playoff teams with a playoff leading 4 shorthanded goals. New York has scored as many goals shorthanded as in the playoffs as they've actually allowed on the power play to opposing teams. Rangers came into the series +7 on special teams, offsetting being just +2 at 5-on-5, and despite a -6.4 shot differential. They'd outscored the opposition 35-26 overall in their previous 10 postseason games and it allowed the fewest goals of any team remaining in the playoffs. The Rangers have won all 6 games in which they've scored a power play goal, including the clincher against Carolina. They were second in power play goals per game, 1.1. Edmonton leads at 1.3. And they're the second best combined special teams in the playoffs behind the Oilers, who have the league's best power play at 37.5 and penalty kill at 91.4. Panthers were top 10 in both power play, 23.5. That was 8th. And the penalty kill, 82.6. That was 6th in the regular season. And they've kind of continued that in the playoffs, coming into the series 8th on the power play, 22, and 3rd on the penalty kill, 86.1. So special teams is going to be a focal point of this series as well. Florida scored 8 power play goals in their first 11 games, which looks good in the rankings, but half of those goals came in Game 3 against Boston, so they only have 4 power play goals in their other 10 games. On the flip side, the Rangers power play had a 3-game goalless drought in the middle of their series against Carolina, but returned to form with Kreider's game-tying tip-in into the Game 6 series clincher. Now, New York had 5 power play goals and 2 shorthanded against Carolina. Hurricanes outscored New York at 13-12 at 5-on-5, but the Rangers had as many shorthanded goals as Carolina had power play goals. 2. The Blue Shirts will need to keep that level of special teams proficiency as they can't expect to create a large amount of shot volume against the Panthers, who are allowing just 24.1 shots on goal per game in the playoffs. But they didn't generate a lot of shot volume against the Hurricanes either, just 26.2 per game, and still managed to come out on top. They'll need to make the most of their chances, which they have done so far in the postseason coming into this series. Their 9.7 shooting percentage at 5-on-5 is 5th among all playoff teams overall, but it'll be less of an issue if they can win the special teams battle again. Now, they only won half that battle in Game 1. They were a perfect 3-for-3 on the penalty kill, allowing the Panthers just 3 shots with the man advantage. But they were 0-for-2 on their own man advantage with only 4 shots on goal. If they can win both sides of the battle starting with game 2, the 1994 vibes will continue, at least for the hockey tenants of the world's most famous arena.
Yeah, I think the one thing that you noticed, at least through the end of the series, of the Carolina series and the beginning of the Florida series, is the Rangers just have been kind of outmanned, even though they don't get specifically completely outshot. In those first 2 games, they did get outshot, but it was more Carolina putting pressure on, and the Rangers actually getting quality shots. Now it's just being used everything against them so far. For the Florida Panthers, I usually can't win an argument with these two in terms of, because they're really steadfast in almost all their things, but there's no real bad Bobrovsky right now this postseason, or at least hasn't been for the whole, and hasn't been for really most of the last 2 years. This has been his best year in Florida, coming off that run into the Stanley Cup Finals last year. Jay kind of talked about it on the last show, and I'm just going to continue to kind of harp on it. 6 shutouts in the regular season, got his first shutout in the postseason on Wednesday. And this is a guy who started 58 games this year and has really just shown that he's been able to make the big saves in the later parts of the game. One of the things that is harder, I think, for a goalie to do, almost as hard as saving 55 to 60 shots constantly in a game, is being able to save a shot after not having a shot on goal for the span of 14 minutes and 28 seconds, which the Rangers did in game 2. They had 10 shots by the goal, but never actually had a shot on goal in that entire span. And that's what their coach Paul Maurice has said about Bobrovsky. That has been kind of impressive this postseason. He doesn't really get, again, a lot of shots on him, because that is one of the best that is probably the best defense right now in the National Hockey League, especially who's left. So right now, this postseason, 9-3, 2.17 goals against average, and if you just continue again, 27.8 shots against him in the regular season, 24, as Jay had mentioned, going into this playoff game. The other teams, the Oilers only let up 24.5, and we'll talk about why they need to have as few shots as possible in goal in just a moment. 27.5 for the Stars, 32 for the Rangers. And this is a team that has had a perfect blend of offense, especially having killers like Matthew Tkachuk and Sam Reinhart on the offense, and just really just having one of the most sound teams out there. And they can get physical with you like they kind of did in the Boston series, just to be like, hey, we're over here and we can kick your ass anytime that we actually want to. So going to be an uphill battle for the Rangers in this series. I think, obviously, it comes without saying, Game 2 is a must-win game for them, or this series could get away from them very quickly. At the least, they need to show some signs of life, because a guy like Sergei Bobrovsky can not only not have to take a shot for 10 minutes, but can go and make many saves in a row that are highlight saves that can rival any of the best in the NHL when he does. There's a reason why he's going to be up for the Vezina Award this year. Probably will go to Connor Hellebuyck of the Winnipeg Jets. But he's really just had a career revival, and I'm very impressed to see a guy like him kind of have a little bit of a second act in Florida after it seemed like his career was possibly going to go in the role of bust. So watch out for good Bob for the rest of this series, I believe.
And by the way, it won't help the Rangers if they're inadvertently scoring in their own net. I mean, Alexis Lafreniere, look, I get what he was trying to do. He was trying to chip the puck away to the side, but at that angle, he inadvertently knocked it in between Circus' legs. That's I mean, look, Florida's a tough team in itself. Trying to score goals. Scoring your own net, it's not going to help matters, especially especially when you literally 5 minutes earlier had a goal disallowed because of goalie interference and kept you in the game. That was the backbreaker that Florida was pretty much.
I think.
I felt so bad because Laff has been playing so well in this postseason. He's really stepped up. To have that happen to him right after that, like, the exhilaration of, okay, no goal, we're still in this, to, oh no, own goal.
Let me tell you though, and I've seen games like that the Rangers and many teams have played. I feel like on that night the Rangers could have played for 16 periods and they wouldn't have scored. So I really think the own goal doesn't become like a footnote. It just becomes a footnote to just was a lifeless game one for both teams. And you kind of also expect that, by the way. Both teams hadn't played for 5 or 6 days going into that. So you expect some rust, and you got some rust in game one.
Yeah, very sluggish by both teams with that long layoff. But Florida definitely leaned on the defense and the goaltending to get a big road win and take home ice advantage.
Yep.
All right, let's move on to the NHL's Western Conference as the two teams looking to get an opportunity at Lord Stanley's Chalice check for winning the conference finals are the Dallas Stars and the Edmonton Oilers. The Stars are looking for their first cup since 1999, which, by the way, is the shortest of the 4 teams that are left in terms of winning a championship. And the Stars are looking to make their first non-COVID cup final since 2000. The cup finals were a thing in 2020. I'm still counting in a different category, at least for right now. Also, it also makes the words better. Anyway, the Oilers are also looking for their first cup and final since 1990. And as we know, Canada hasn't lifted the Chalice track again since 1993. The time to do some predicting as game one is going on. We'll actually start with Jay on this one. Jay, how are the Stars going to push through here?
I mean, it's a pretty simple thing. I mean, we talk about it a lot, but it may be a cliche in the Stanley Cup playoffs, but it's actually true. Who's got, the Stars are going to win if Jake Ottinger continues to stand on his head, and, the Stars can keep what on paper should be the advantage in goal. This is one area where Dallas has it on paper. Ottinger's one of 3 goalies with 8 wins this postseason. His 2.09 goals against and 918 save percentage coming into the Western Conference Finals are among the best marks of any netminder. He's 3rd in save percentage and 1st in goals against among the goalies that are still playing. And the series clincher against Colorado was the showcase. He stopped 28-9 of 30 shots in the 2-1 double overtime win. His performance in the playoffs is more impressive when you consider he's coming off a regular season where he posted career worst numbers in save percentage, 905, and goals against 2.72, though he did close strong, going 10-2 with a 930 save percentage and a 1.8 goals against from March 14th through the end of the regular season. This is the flip side of last season, where after putting up Vezina Trophy worthy numbers in the regular season, he allowed the most postseason goals of any netminder, letting opponents light the lamp 55 times over 19 games. Dallas made the Western Conference Finals last season in spite of his play. This year, they've made it because of his play. You think about the path the Stars took to get here. They got past a pair of dynamic offensive units, the Jack Eichel, Mark Stone, Jonathan Marchessault, Las Vegas Golden Knights in the first round, the Nathan McKinnon, Cole Makar, Mikko Rantanen, Colorado Avalanche in the second round, and now they're facing off against the Edmonton Oilers, led by Connor McDavid, Connor McJesus, as my hockey guy calls him, and Leon Draisaitl, who have been this postseason's most prolific scorers, 21 and 24 points respectively, with McDavid tops in assists with 19, Draisaitl 3rd in goals with 8. It's going to take a total team effort to get past this offensive juggernaut who leads all teams in goals scored and number 1 on the power play, as I said in the previous segment. I mean, that 37.5% conversion rate is ridiculous. They're scoring 15.8 power play goals per 60. Dallas will need to continue their stingy defensive play. They're tied for 3rd fewest goals against per game in the postseason at 2.38 and are 2nd in 5-on-5 expected goals against 2.16 coming into the finals. But the key to that effort is Ottinger, who flipped the switch all the way back in game 3 of the first round against Vegas. Since that game, he's had a 927 save percentage and a 1.93 goals against. He's had a save percentage below 920 in just 4 of his 13 postseason games. And while he only has a 305 goals saved above expected overall, he's the best in the league at 5-on-5 at 7.6 goals saved above expected. An anonymous NHL executive who previewed this series for The Athletic kind of summed it up best, saying, quote, "Let's say Edmonton's superstars find a way to match up with Dallas's depth, both offensively and defensively. The difference between Jake Ottinger and Stuart Skinner or Calvin Pickard in goal is just too much for Edmonton to overcome." I'm inclined to agree. If Jake Ottinger continues to stand on his head, be a brick wall, whatever elite goalie saying you want to use, the Dallas Stars are likely to advance to the final leg of the chase for Lord Stanley's chalice. Now, so far, Ottinger's off to a so-so start in game one. We're at the second intermission. He's given up 2 goals through the first 2 periods, both at 5-on-5, after I just gave him props for what he's been doing at 5-on-5. So he stopped 14 of 16 shots overall, 9 of 11 at even strength. That's an .875 save percentage and 3 flat goals against, as Dallas trails 2-1 with 40 of the 60 minutes in the book.
One of the interesting things about the Dallas Stars, by the way, first of all, everybody calls Connor David McJesus. You can give your hockey guy credit, but that is a more known thing around the entire world. This is my hockey thing.
Wow.
Person being told this. But again, that's one of the things, though, that's interesting in any postseason. I know we've always talked about the goaltender standing on their head, and this is actually, we have 3 of the 4 best goalies really in the regular season, at least top 10 in this Final Four, is the fact that sometimes a good offensive scheme like the Oilers will be able to beat it. And that's something that's going to be very interesting going into this series, because Edmonton, the last 2 games against Vancouver, who have also scored at a frenetic pace in that series, kind of outmuscled them and really almost put Vancouver to shame in those first 40 minutes of Game 7. But it's a long series, and Anthony, the Edmonton Oilers will win this series if their goalie doesn't fuck up as much as he has in the past in Stuart Skinner.
Yeah, at least for the Edmonton Oilers, with all the offensive firepower they have, to have the weakest goalie situation of the 4 remaining teams left in the playoffs. Yeah, it's consistency at goalie. I mean, Stuart Skinner, he started got most of the starts in the postseason. 7-3 in his 10 starts. But actually was benched in the middle of this last round against Vancouver. Calvin Pickard started 2 games in the middle portion of that series, games 4 and 5, when he went 1-1 with a 2.21 goals against and a 91% save percentage in the 2 starts, 3 games when you realize Skinner was benched in game 3 of that series. But Skinner in those 10 games, 2.87 goals against and an 88% save percentage and 1 shutout. Edmonton has gotten to this point with despite having an NHL worst 88.889 save percentage on 5-on-5, and that's including all 16 teams that made this year's postseason tournament. So in the 10 starts for Skinner, 81% against a Los Angeles Kings team that really wasn't good to begin with, and just got into the playoffs just on pure principle. And an and a Vancouver Canucks team that they were able to limit for most of Game 7 until literally all hell broke loose, and Vancouver almost came back and won that game. It's going to be a question of which Stuart Skinner shows up, and would it be the goalie who was beaten 12 times in 58 shots the first 3 games of that second round series? Or would it be the one that stepped up and secured a 5-1 Game 6 win for Edmonton and won Game 7? And so far tonight in Game 2, he's been up to the challenge. 17 saves on 18 shots for the first 40 minutes of play. Early on the first period, he made a couple of terrific saves to kind of really set the tempo for the Edmonton Oilers. And if he can be consistent between the pipes, especially against a really good Dallas Stars team, Edmonton has a chance, because they can score goals, they can get the offense going, and obviously anything when you have Kane and McDavid on the ice, you gotta live your chances, whether it's 5-on-5 or especially on the power play. But you don't want to get into a shootout, and that's something that the Edmonton Oilers is going to have to really be careful of, because they don't want to have to keep switching to playing goalie merry-go-round. Especially just late in the postseason, when they'll pretty much maybe at the end of the night 3 games away from a Stanley Cup final. So it's going to be the key is going to be the Stuart Skinner, if he can just match the level of the other 3 teams that's remaining as far as goalie production. Edmonton has a chance in this series.
I appreciate you for not saying the words goalie Russian roulette and actually really limiting yourself to go back to goalie merry-go-round immediately afterwards. It's kind of a trope that I've always heard before. And one thing that interests me, and there's one common factor that I find interesting in this series, the NHL has always been about parity, but you do have 4 teams that have been in the Final Four within the last 2 seasons previous. Rangers in 2022, Panthers obviously in 2023. Dallas last year. Edmonton just 2 years ago made the conference finals, also didn't win a game in the conference finals. And one of the reasons was because the Avalanche had so much offense and the Edmonton Oilers did not have good goaltending. That goaltending never really got fixed. So you might have to win in spite of your goaltender, but when you have 4 really, really good goal scorers that can go out on the ice, I think you have a chance. And speaking of, I'll start on that side of the ball and go with Ryan Nugent-Hopkins as my X factor for the Edmonton Oilers. He's been flopping around this year. He has had very good seasons. This past season, 67 points, 18 goals, 49 assists. But he did, during these playoffs, get adjusted to line 1, where he would be playing outside alongside Zach Hyman and Connor McDavid. Connor McJesus, two scorers who have just been pretty dominant. Probably the 2 best scorers on the team, not even including Draisaitl, by the way. In this postseason, 4 goals, 12 assists, 17 shots on net, 21 hits, and a +3 rating, and he had 3 power play goal and assist and blocked 3 shots of his own in the 3-2 win against the Canucks in Game 7. He's just been solid, and moving him to the top line has really helped him, as anybody would, but has really helped him just continue on being one of the most well-rounded players on an Oilers team that is kind of a modern-day murderer's row of offense right now. And there's not a lot of teams. There's probably no team with more pressure on them in this Final Four than the Edmonton Oilers are, because every season when you have 2 of the 5 best players in the world is Stanley Cup or bust, like it or not. That's why they went through a coaching change this regular season after they got off to a terrible start and went with Chris Knobloch as their head coach. Fun fact, by the way, for you guys, all 4 coaches left have coached at some point in the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut area as a head coach at one point or another. Peter DeBoer was the Devils head coach. Oh my God, I'm almost. Knobloch was a coach for the Rangers for 1 game after David Gordon got fired back in that big mess in 2021 that Dolan just fired everybody. And Paul Maurice coached for the Hartford Whalers. So everybody in this area has actually coached in the metropolitan area, which is something I think that is freaking hilarious to see. Almost as hilarious as seeing The Rock in a Hofstra wrestling shirt. It really shows that we are going local here. Nico Heiskanen is going to be my choice for Dallas Stars X Factor. Tremendous playoffs. He leads the team in playoff points going into tonight with 13 goals in 13 games. He's always been one of the best scoring defensemen in the NHL. He has amazing playmaking ability, 5 goals in the playoffs, and he can tie the Stars record for most goals by a defenseman in a playoff year. And it was himself that did that in 2020, the year the Stars made it to the COVID bubble finals of the Stanley Cup. And he had a 2-goal game in May 9th against in the Western Conference semifinals against Colorado, and most goals in the playoff year. He could become top 10. He's right now averaging 0.38 goals per game in this postseason. His assists are much better. He has the 5th highest assist average by a defenseman who's played more than 10 games in these playoffs. You're going to need someone like him to really be the guy. I mean, you have so much good talent in the offensive end for Dallas. This is a really good Final Four because everybody is kind of in must-win mode right now. I know there's no Indiana Pacers happy to be here. We'll do our best, but were kind of overmatched. Now, all four of these teams expect, based on their regular season performance, to win Lord Stanley's Chalice. And I truly think that Dallas has a very good chance to do it. As long as Miro stays on the radar, this team is, again, they could also put up goals in a hurry. There's not going to be a lot of 2-2. There's not going to be a lot of 1-0 type games in this series. I think we should kind of think about that now. But one thing about Dallas that also really impresses me going in here is their ability to bounce back. They may lose this game one, but guess what? They lost the first 2 games at home against Vegas and ended up winning 4 out of the next 5. They blew a 3-0 lead in game 1 at home against the Colorado Avalanche and went to win 4 out of the next 5. So Dallas is used to kind of digging out of holes, which a lot of teams haven't really been doing in this postseason. A lot of these teams have been playing from ahead. I know Edmonton did have to get out of a 3-2 hole to beat Vancouver in their series, but I think the Western Conference is going to be a very, very formidable opponent for whoever comes out of the East. We have a very good Final Four in the NHL, and you can pick a lot of X factors. These are the 2 I picked for the 2 teams that are here right now. All right, let's move on to the National Basketball Association. All right, going to sound a little bitter here. Despite rolling over teams with so many injuries that you could fill an all first and second team with, I really could. The Pacers and Celtics have made it to the Eastern Conference Finals. The Pacers are here for the first time since 2014, making it with a resume that includes being the runner-up in the NBA's first in-season tournament. That's a tournament, by the way, where they won in the quarterfinals against the Celtics to get to Las Vegas, mind you. The Celtics, 4th conference final in the last 5 years, 6th in the last 8, 10th since the last time the Knicks made a conference final. I'll mention that again later on in my rant, but just want to kind of do that. They haven't seen a game 6 yet. They won game 1 of this series at a nip and tuck thriller, 133-128, and it looks like they're on their way to holding serve at home, which means that the Boston Indiana series hasn't started yet. Guess we can do all of our actual analysis on it. All right, they're now going to be 10-2 this postseason. Anthony, we'll keep you away from the Pacers, but that means you still have to talk Celtics. Celtics will go on, hold on, and make themselves the Eastern Conference champions for the second time in the last 3 years, if they do what?
Well, obviously, Adrian Wojnarowski just broke some news, and I'll add to my point. But it was just to slow down Tyrese Halliburton, and we've seen a tale of 2 Halliburtons, and in the games where the Pacers lost in that Knicks series, which is 3 games, he only averaged 17 points a game. In those 3 games. But in the 4 that they won, he's averaged 24 on 17 shots. And part of the thing is with the Pacers that Halliburton is kind of the engine that gets this offense going. I mean, he plays up tempo, he plays fast. We've seen time and time again that Knicks series, even in the first round against Milwaukee, after the main basket, Halliburton pushing the tempo almost immediately after the main basket up the court to get an easy layup or even set up a dunk. But what the Celtics need to do is they have to slow the game down. They have to make Indiana a half court team and make them have to make the tough shots. So Pascal Siakam had a big game tonight. Obviously, he's one of the few players the Pacers have that can create and generate his own offense in the half court under the 24-second clock. You go back to that in-season, the 5 games they played including the in-season tournament. Boston winning 3 out of those 5 games. They outscored Indiana 129-116 those games. And the Pacers did not shoot the ball well. They shot just 46% in those games, 31% from behind the arc. And Tyrese Halliburton had 25 points and 10 assists in game 1, including knocking down a couple of 3-pointers. But here's the thing too, what Tyrese Halliburton does for this Pacers offense, the Celtics need to take away. He can get into the paint, and when he's aggressive, he opens up everything else for the Pacers. And the Pacers in game 1 got 56 points in the paint. So Boston clearly did in game 2 was able to do a better job of getting back on defense and kind of slowing things up a little bit. Just enough. Now, Tyrese Halliburton, I never knock on him, and this is the point I'm going to get to, is he had to be publicly shamed into being aggressive. Remember in game 1 against in that Knicks series, he only took 8 shots in that game. He was not looking for a shot whatsoever. And he, from that point forward, from game 2 on that series, you saw he was more aggressive, and more willing to be more scoring first, more scoring first. He led the league in assists. So obviously he is a guy, a pass first mentality point guard who can score. Tonight in game 2, only took 8 shots, finished with 10 points. However, he did leave the game. Adrian Wojnarowski reported that he left due to left hamstring soreness.
Yep.
He had hamstring issues early in the season that kept him out. Kept him out of some games, and he did struggle coming back from that hamstring. For his shooting, particularly from 3, he was just over 30% for the second half of the season. Was able to find his stroke in the playoffs. So it's going to be very interesting because now with the conference final schedule being every other night, game 3 is in 48 hours. Will he be healthy enough to play a game 3? I mean, we talked about the Celtics kind of being the beneficiaries to playing teams that had an injury or 2 along the way. The Pacers are literally beating up on teams missing key players the first 2 rounds. And I hate to say that because I don't want to feel like I'm taking away any day from the Indiana Pacers. They've been a good team. They play their style of brand of basketball regardless. And these last 3 games, they have shot the ball extremely well, particularly in game 7 when they shot 67% at Madison Square Garden on the road, a tough environment. When you look at the Celtics and their ability to throw different bodies at Halliburton with Drew Holiday and Derek White and of course Brown and Tatum respectively, that gives the Celtics a chance to kind of mix and match Halliburton's speed along with his ability to his court vision as well. But game 3 is going to be interesting to see if he's going to be healthy enough for game 3. If he's not, and he's going to have to sit, that makes the Celtics defensive situation a lot easier, knowing that the Pacers motor would be sitting on the bench and not running up and down the court and getting that Fieldhouse crowd into it from the word go.
I do think, though, the one thing that I'm not going to insult Tyrese Halliburton here, but the one thing that is good with both of these teams is the amount of depth that they have, that they can lose somebody or not have a guy playing his best performance and being able to still be as oiled of a machine that you could possibly have with the broken wheel. So that broken wheel right now, if Halliburton's out, that is a huge factor, but not the most important player. I think you could say he's the most important player to this team, but it's definitely 1A, 1B, and 1C on that team. And that's why they've made this run. And again, you could only play, obviously, the teams that are ahead of you in the states that they are in. And I as much as we almost take injuries for granted now, and it's almost like, why is this person get injured every year? Why does this person get injured every year? Let's take a look at this training regimen. This guy's been running to the ground. Shit happens. I think sometimes shit does happen, especially when you play a season that's 75 to 80 games, and now you're almost encouraged to play 75 to 80 games, not necessarily load management. And you get situations like that, and you just have to play survival of the fittest. And Indiana can play survival of the fittest.
Yeah, it was interesting that, like, they have kind of been the, no disrespect to their on-court performance, but they, to a certain extent, have been the beneficiary to other teams' misfortune. If you think about the players on the other teams that they've played who have not been available, that has kind of helped them make their way to the Eastern Conference Finals.
However, as I said before, that doesn't mean that all of a sudden those players on the floor can't stop a team from shooting 67% from the field now.
Yeah, that's the thing too. That's the thing too. Keep in mind, yes, the Knicks was banged up and injured, but they also had a 3-2 series lead banged up and short-handed against this Pacers team. So again, the Pacers they're a different team without Halliburton. It's going to be interesting to see if he's available for Game 3. And by the way, Rabbi, you pretty much described every Laker fan when it comes to Anthony Davis the last 3 seasons.
You as well, by
healthy.
the way, that we've argued. I know you're not a Laker fan, but you've done the same exact thing, and it's funny. Every single time Anthony Davis does one thing wrong, every Laker fan is like, and it just continues on the same path. But we'll see what happens as it goes on. Let's talk about the Pacers, who are about to go back home, where they're 6-0 this postseason. So my old Indiana home is probably a very good Indiana home for the Pacers. But how did they get back in this series? How are the Pacers going to come back and win this series?
I mean, look, it's gonna. We all know what their top level stars can do, but I mean, they've gotten this far by having, far and away the best bench in the NBA, and that's kind of what they kind of need to keep that going. Their reserves far and away led all teams in scoring in the regular season. 3,837 points. That's 46.8 per game. 200 during the regular season, 266 points ahead of the Jazz, who had the second highest scoring bench. For the most part, Indiana's continued this in the playoffs. They averaged 33.2 points per game coming into the Eastern Conference Finals, tops among all playoff teams, led by T.J. McConnell, with a primary assist from Obi Toppin and hockey assist from Isaiah Jackson and Ben Shepherd. And they're a huge reason why the Pacers came into this series averaging 121.8 points per 100 possessions with an effective field goal percentage of 58.1%, which are both tops among the playoff teams. Now, coming into this series, Toppin's per 36 numbers, 20.8 points, 8.5 boards, 3.2 assists are up there with McConnell's. He's averaging 11 points per game overall, including 20-point outings in each of the first 2 series. And he has the second best player efficiency rating on the team at 20.6 and fourth highest usage rate, 22.4. Jackson had the Pacers' best offensive rating, 133, and defensive rating 113, and leads the team in field goal percentage 59.4 and rebounds per 36 minutes at 10.6. Shepherd leads the team in true shooting percentage at 67.2% and effective field goal percentage at 66. Ridiculous numbers coming into the series against Boston. But it all starts with McConnell, who since Game 6 of the first round series against Milwaukee, who's been averaging 12.9 points per game on 54.1% from the floor, 44.4% from 3. He only averages a little over 1 attempt per game, but he is knocking stuff down. And he's been perfect at the line with almost 1 attempt per game. 6.4 assists and 1.5 steals in a little under 21 minutes per game coming into this series. His per 36 minutes, 20 points per game, 9.9 assists, 1.7 steals. He leads the Pacers. Think about that. A team with Halliburton and Siakam, and he leads the Pacers in usage rate, 27.3 coming into this series. He's done most of his damage, 61.8% of his field goal attempts, from either at the rim or from 3 to 10 feet. And the Pacers' offensive rating coming into this series with him on the floor is 125.8 and 121.7 with him off. Their defensive rating with him on the floor, 117.6, 120.5 with him off. Overall, team is +7 net with him on the floor. Now, McConnell was one of the Pacers' best players against the Knicks. Indiana outscored New York by 31 points with him in the lineup, losing all other minutes by 3. His ability to hit shots in between the Knicks' bigs deep in the paint was a big positive for Indiana and allowed them to maintain their high level of offense even when Halliburton was off the floor. There were points in this series where the Knicks just could not stop him. 12.7 assists in less than 24 minutes in Game 7, pushing the pace, finding holes in the New York D, getting to his patented pull-up 8-footers. His ability to stay on the attack and make impact plays on both ends of the floor are going to make him a tough cover for the Boston defense, and that's so far has been somewhat proven out. On the flip side, the Boston defense looks to target small guards and ISOs, but McConnell's a tough defender with great hands, and he's really good at disrupting the rhythm of whomever he's guarding, usually the opponent's lead guard, which often leads to steals in the open court. Now, it's going to be interesting to see what the Celtics will do throughout this series to try and prevent McConnell from getting downhill and into the paint where he's done so much damage. As I said previously, he showed in the Knicks series that he's quite adept at navigating in and around tall trees in the paint to reset the offensive actions from the post, catch defenders off guard. With Shepherd shooting so well coming into this series and Toppin being a threat to cut when McConnell inverts the shape of the offense, the Pacers bench, on paper, was going to pose a real problem for the East #1 seed. Depth matters in this league and in the playoffs. Pacers won game 7 by 21 points, but their starting lineup was just +6 in its 16.4 minutes. Their bench, led by McConnell, was the key to the victory. McConnell and Toppin maintained that level of play in game 1 against the Celtics, and it's a big reason why the Pacers gave the Celtics all they could handle and then some, taking them to OT before coming up short. Toppin had 11 in the first half. McConnell just 4. They flipped that in the second half. Toppin finished with 15. McConnell finished with 13. They had 28 of the 30 bench points. Shepherd had the other 2. The Pacers were +4 in Toppin's 21 minutes, -8 in McConnell's 25. The previous 4 playoff games, and remember this, guys, the previous 4 playoff games in which McConnell's had a plus-minus worse than -8, -13, -18, and -19 twice, the Pacers lost 3 of those games. In game 1, McConnell did their job, and Toppin did their job, as did the Pacers trio of stars. Turner, 23-10 double-double. Halliburton, 25 and 10 assist double-double. Siakam, 24 and 12 on the boards. Though at +7, he was the only one with a positive plus-minus. Turner and Halliburton were both -11. Pacers lost in OT, but they made the Celtics work for that W. Now, in game 2 that just ended, the Pacers bench struggled. McConnell had just 9, 4 of 10 from the floor, -18. There's that plus-minus being bigger than +8. The -8. Toppin had 11, just 11, 4 of 6, 1 of 2, 2 of 4. He was -5. Boston did not fall prey to their usual game 2 face planting, containing all of the Pacers other than Siakam en route to the double-digit win. And other than McConnell and Toppin, the rest of the NBA's best bench seemed to have left their game back in Indiana in the competitive portion of the game. Pacers reserves did finish with 39 overall, but the bulk of the non-McConnell Toppin points came in garbage time. Now, the old NBA adage says that bench and role players play better at home. The Pacers bench proved otherwise against the Knicks, but they will need to prove the adage true in games 3 and 4, or else they may be going fishing by the time Memorial Day ends.
I heard the water's really nice around that time, actually. So if you're going to go fishing, go now. The one thing I noticed about McConnell... The one thing I've noticed about McConnell, and it's interesting, and I know we're not going to do too much like in-depth analysis of the Knicks season when we go to our last segment, is the fact that McConnell is only really a guy who can play 22 to 25 minutes. It's not a knock. It's true. It's the truth. He has a motor that goes so fast that there is an expiration date during those games. And you kind of saw it in the first 3 games at home, where he came out like a flash, and then all of a sudden he kind of sputtered at the end, making a few dumb turnovers. And really, fourth quarter TJ McConnell playing anywhere above really that 25-minute plateau is not the same, obviously, as first and second quarter TJ McConnell. You kind of, if you're going to
and it's why you saw it's why you saw in game 1 that, mid to late fourth quarter and all of overtime, the Pacers went with their starting 5.
Which is right. The right way to go. Because that's the point where McConnell does best. I don't know if you would ever be able to play him late just because of his kind of, what's the word I'm going to say, like kind of home run defense. It's either like you get the steal or you don't get anything. And in that situation, you don't want to be in that situation. You don't want open shots to come out, because if they do, Boston will usually hit them. And that's what they did, especially towards late in that game. And obviously a lot of the case of Jaylen Brown too, but we'll see what happens with Indiana. Speaking of Indiana, I'm going to talk about something that is very rare. It's kind of going back more to the last series, and that's defense. Aaron Nesmith had a pretty good defensive series, and really the whole trend of the series with the Knicks changed when Nesmith was placed as the primary defender on Jalen Brunson, because that's when Brunson struggled, especially that game 3 and game 4. I know game 4 got pretty much out of hand immediately, but Nesmith is a guy who has been able to, at least, he was drafted by the Boston Celtics, by the way, in 2020 and got traded mid-season the next year. And he's been better in this role now. 72 games this season, 12.2 points, 1.5 assists. He is a 50% shooter from the field. Started 47 of 72 games. So really a Swiss is really what you could say is, and as everybody says, a Swiss Army knife, as actually TJ McConnell has actually said about him. And in the first series, he guarded Chris Middleton. That's an entirely different matchup than guarding Jalen Brunson. And that recipe really helped them kind of get to this series, get to this point. Neesmith has been okay in the first two games of this series. He played 40 minutes in game number 1, went for 14 points, had a +1, which is rare for the losing team to have anybody who plays that long and having a plus on the court, and was 6 of 12 tonight. A lot of that team just didn't matter. Only 9 points, only 3 rebounds. Fouled out of game 1, by the way, and had 4 fouls in game 2, something to kind of look forward to. If you're going to get fouls on Neesmith, you're going to be able to kind of neutralize him, and he's obviously no one's going to be able to play that same defense the way that they did at the beginning of the game. But that shows one of the reasons why the Indiana Pacers are so deep in their starting 5 and their bench. That's the way that they can come back and win this series. I never understood the whole role players play better on the road type of thing, but it is a thing.
No, it's just play better at home.
I'm sorry, that's what I meant to say. Play better at home. I just never understood that. I guess home cooking and all that other stuff, but it also just shows that you're a streaky player, and that's why you are going to be a role player for the rest of your life. You need to make that next jump. But I digress. Guy who is, I think, officially killed the role of a role player and has now become kind of the second or third best player that you could have on your championship team is the Boston X Factor Derek White. He had his second straight NBA All Defensive Team, second team on Tuesday. Career highs in steals, 1 per game, blocks 1.2. He was 8th in the Defensive Player of the Year voting and has swatted the most shots out of any guard in the past 3 seasons with 221 blocks. He was kind of a really trade that was given from San Antonio in the middle of the 2021 season, and White has pretty much been in that lineup ever since. But in the first 10 games of this postseason, before going into the series, 18.2 points a night, 48.5% of the field, 43.5% of the arc, had a 38-point game with 8 3-pointers in game 4 of the Eastern Conference quarterfinals against the Miami Heat. And Derek White has continued his really good play this postseason. This postseason, now he's up to 20. This postseason, he has had some very good games. Tonight, he went for 23.6 assists, 50% from 3, over 50% from field goal, from the overall field goal percentage. He has just been a guy, and he has really become, in many ways, a number 3 scorer. In many ways, the best defensive guy of the team. His plus minus has been plus. He was plus in all of the wins, obviously, plus 11, plus 12, plus 17, plus 5, plus 13. He is pretty much a net positive anytime you put him on the court right now. And the regular season, you have him for 33 minutes a game. You can put him on for even longer in the postseason. 8 for 15 tonight, and just there is not a more improved player, I think, over these past few years for this team as Derek White has had. And when you think about it, he's not a replacement for what Marcus Smart did in his time in Boston, but I think he's made people pretty much forget that Marcus Smart not existed, but he's pretty much been the linchpin of the leadership on the court, of the leadership of this team. And he's one of the reasons why his maturity is why the Boston Celtics have gone from like a 55, 56 win plus team to getting into the high 60s and being the prohibited favorite in this year's NBA. And I expect the same from Derek White. Even in the game where Jason Tatum was horrible for most of the entire game, it didn't really matter because Derek White kind of picked up the slack, and then Jaylen Brown picked up Tatum's slack. And now Boston knows that they can get more performances from guys who they didn't expect to get from in the past. So Tatum can have a terrible game, and they can still comfortably win. Same with Jaylen Brown. So I think the Boston Celtics have a lot of X factors, but this is the best one right now.
Yeah, it's been interesting to me because I mean, you guys remember how I kind of poked the bear a little bit and dissed them a little bit when we were previewing the series, their previous round series. with the whole, they haven't seemed to play a complete 48-minute game, let alone a complete, consistent A game across their series. But what's interesting is that where they used to have to solely rely on the likes of the Jays to, if they were going to, win a game, win a series, get a bucket when they needed to get a bucket. The emergence of the other guys on this team. And I'll tell you this, if you're the Milwaukee Bucks, how much are you missing Drew Holiday right about now? I mean, talk about putting
I never liked the Lillard move, and it's really cost them this season. It really has.
The way that this brand new backcourt of theirs has meshed. They've really come together. I thought the loss of KP was really going to hurt them, but Al Horford continues to defy Father Time. And anybody, the way that the way everyone else has stepped up on this team is Jason Tatum doesn't have to dominate the basketball in terms of taking all the shots. He can just be whatever Boston needs him to be on a given night because everyone else has raised the level of their game. I mean, the NBA Finals will be the true test. And yeah, I mean, I know it's 2-0, and we saw what the Pacers did being down 2-0 previously, but I fully expect Boston to come out of this. And to me, the big test will be in the actual finals because you're the Boston Celtics. You got all those banners and retired numbers hanging in the garden rafters. That's the expectation. So they're not simply looking to get to the finals.
Oh no,
they're looking to win
it. They need to win.
Yeah, so and I'll say this too: with the Celtics, they're going to put Porzingis back at some point, which is going to make them.
Game 4 is kind of the target right now.
Back into the series.
If the Celtics can avoid what I call those hiccup games that they've had, we've seen
game 2 against Miami, face plant tonight.
Game 2 against Cleveland. Even a month ago when they got beat by 25 on national television by a short-handed Knicks team at home, the Celtics, for whatever reason, maybe because of this, the fact that they won 64 games, that they occasionally had this let-up as far as the intensity, they have to keep their foot on the metal. Like, this is the way things are shaping up is it's an NBA final championship for them to lose because we know that because they're the most talented team by far left in the playoffs. Overall, they've been the best team all season. They're actually going to get healthy. Have to the postseason progress because they're going to bring us back. But they've developed into a team that is just as good defensively, and like you said, Jay, just not relying on Brown and Tatum having to score combined for 75, 80 points a night. When you have a Derek White that can and Al Horford that can still knock down the 3-pointer and defend with the best of them. But Drew Holiday just gives them a whole different dynamic in that backcourt. And yeah, you said it, Milwaukee definitely missed them this season, particularly in the playoffs. I guess it's very Indiana Pacers team when they just had no answers for the Pacers in that 6-game series loss.
And to think, guys, that if Milwaukee and Portland had been able to pull off, hadn't needed a third team to pull off this trade, Drew Holiday would already be going fishing right about now. So, how about that? Funny how things work out.
If not, Drew Holiday wouldn't have been going to Boston. That's the key. Drew Holiday would have never stayed in Milwaukee because of Damian Lillard. You can't.
No, I'm talking about. I mean, if the trade had gone down,
the trade had gone down, no,
right, without involving the third team.
I'm more looking at the fact that kind of giving him away as kind of a throwaway. Portland having giving him away in a throwaway to Boston. I honestly think that it just didn't work out the right way for Milwaukee, and they've really made. I think they've locked up Drew Holiday for the future as Boston, and that's the right call because he is a leader and he could be the missing piece for the second time in 4 years for an NBA champion. So
there you go.
We'll see what that happens. All right. As Anthony Strait, just turning 41, can prove to us. Happy birthday, Anthony.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Age ain't nothing but a number. This also includes Anthony's cat, who also turned a ripe old age of 7 on Monday. Happy birthday, Anthony Strait's cat. Never actually know what the name is.
Sleeping, by the way.
All right. Well, again, it's a little late for her, so whatever. She'll wake up at 1 a.m. Anyway, age ain't nothing but a number. The same can't be said. It can also be said of the Western Conference, where seeds ain't nothing but a number. The 5-seed Mavericks, in the words of Ronald Reagan, didn't want to bring up age, but took advantage of their opponent's youth and inexperience in beating the number 1 seed Oklahoma City Thunder in 6 games. The number 3 seed Minnesota Timberwolves went to 2 seed Denver, the defending reigning champions, in Game 7, and for the 3rd time in the series, defeated them in the Pepsi Center and ended the chance for a repeat.
Isn't it Ball Arena at this point?
Ball Arena, Pepsi Center, whatever, Mile High, whatever. I don't care. You want me to call Heinz Field Acrisure Field? Exactly. So now we find Jay's favorite team, 2 lower-seeded underdogs playing to each other to see who represents the Western Conference in the 2024 NBA Finals. And as per the league script that I got, it went right to form as the Mavericks won Game 1 of this series last night, 108-105. Jay, Dallas needs to win and keep their momentum, so Dallas will finish off this series if
they can find a consistent third scorer. And I mean, look, we know that every game plan when facing the Mavericks starts with Luka Doncic, who will likely continue to be a triple-double machine. He had 1 in each of the final 3 games of the previous series, averaging 30, 11, and 10 in the win in Game 5 and 6. And Kyrie Irving, who despite being held at 15.7 points per game overall into single digits on several occasions against OKC, has come up big in the postseason throughout his career. Those 2, along with the Mavs defense, and whoever thought defense would be the Mavs calling card, will be the main focus for the Timberwolves. But for the Mavs to reach the NBA Finals for the first time since 2011, when Dirk Nowitzki brought home the Larry O'Brien Trophy, they will need to find a consistent third scorer to back up their prolific backcourt. The reason for this is while the Mavs are scoring 119.2 points per 100 possessions coming into this series and have outscored their opponents by 11.2 points per 100 possessions in the 428 total minutes Doncic and Irving have been on the floor together so far in the playoffs, they're only scoring 98.4 points per 100 possessions and have been outscored by their opponents by 17.3 points per 100 possessions in the 130 total minutes, 10.8 per game, when only one of the 2 is on the floor. The Mavs were 1-3 against the T-Wolves in the regular season and scored just 105.6 per 100 possessions in those games, which was their worst mark against any opponent. But Doncic and Irving only played together just 1 of the 4, and all 4 of those games came before the additions of Daniel Gafford and, for the purpose of my angle, PJ Washington. Washington's averaging 14.3 points per game, 6.8 boards. He's knocking down his 6.8 threes per game at a 40.7% clip overall in the playoffs. But he was the unsung hero of the Mavs series win over OKC, averaging 17.7 points per game, 8.3 boards with a shooting slash line of 47.6% from the floor, 46.9% from 3 on 8, a little over 8 attempts per game. He was knocking down 50% of his free throws. He doesn't get to the line much. But he was inconsistent. He averaged 25.7 points per game on 48.2% from the floor and 50% from 3 on 11 attempts per game in games 2, 3, and 4, but only 9.7 points per game on 45% from the floor and 40% from 3 on 5 attempts per game in games 1, 5, and 6. And like I said, he doesn't get to the line much, but he actually did go 3 for 5 in the series clincher, knocking down the game-winning free throws. The other potential candidate for the third scorer role is James Jones, but like Washington, he's kind of been up and down. He never had more than 14 points in any game of the first-round series with the Clippers, and he was hot and cold against OKC. In games 1, 2, and 3, he averaged 6.3 points per game, shot just 25.9% from the floor, a little over 18% from 3 on 3.7 attempts per game. Went to the line just once. But then he exploded in games 4, 5, and 6, postseason career highs in scoring in those 3 games, and he averaged overall 19.3 points on 64.7% shooting from the floor, 50% on 5.3 attempts per game. What'll be interesting to watch in this series is how Dallas looks to utilize Washington and Jones, and how much of that will be forced on Dallas by how Minnesota attacks Doncic, as opposed to running actual actions involving either of those guys specifically. As one NBA executive was breaking down the series for The Athletic said, quote, "Who guards PJ Washington? Does Dallas go to him actually in plays? They went to him on posts against the Thunder some. Do they find ways to go to him?" Another idea is, will they attempt to run specific spot up or catch and shoot actions for him? Coming into the Western Conference Finals, Washington led all players with at least 10 postseason games in spot up possessions per game, 7.8, spot up points per game, 8.9, and third in spot up frequency, 56.7% of his possessions ended with spot ups. He's also, will they run some obvious specific catch and shoot actions for him? Tied for first with 8.3 points per game on catch and shoots, 2.8 3-pointers per game on catch and shoot. How often will the Mavs look to run pick and pops for Washington and or Jones to free them up for threes? Doncic is averaging 12.2 pick and roll possessions per game and a tick under 1 point per possession so far on pick and rolls in the playoffs. Will Dallas look to increase that against Minnesota, or will Washington and Jones get most of their looks out of the T-Wolves doubling on Doncic? How often will Doncic hunt, let's say, Mike Conley, who's a likely candidate to be guarding Jones, in order to free Jones up for open looks while Doncic's primary defender is trying to defeat the screen? How often will the Mavs look to get Jones pick and pop threes above the break? Minnesota will likely live with those looks unless he starts knocking them down at a high rate. Look, no matter how it happens, Dallas needs to get Washington and Jones their looks. Minnesota is counting on them not shooting the lights out from beyond the arc like they did against OKC. And the Mavs are hoping that they shoot close to that against the Wolves. How that plays out could determine whether or not the Mavericks get out of the Western Conference Finals. Now, Dallas managed to steal game one in Minnesota despite their shooters only going 6 for 25 from beyond the arc. They came from 3 down at the half to win by 3, but it was all because of Doncic, who went for 33, 19 in the second half, 15 in the fourth quarter, and Irving, who went for 33, 24 in the first half. Neither Jones, 8 points on 4 of 9 overall, 4 of 9 from the floor, 0 for 2 from beyond the arc, -8 for the game, nor Washington, 13 points on 4 of 10 from the floor, 2 of 8 from 3, plus 12 for the game, and the only other Mav with more than 10 points. Neither of them had much of an impact, but part of that was by design, as Minnesota's defense decided to lock down the Dallas shooters and see if Luka and Kyrie could win the game on their own. Now, it worked in game one, but at some point, the Mavs will need Jones and or Washington to knock down some shots and provide the type of tertiary scoring impact they had against OKC if the Mavs are to make it to the NBA Finals.
What's interesting, the way you just said it, is actually the fact that there's not been a lot of times in these playoffs that Luka and Kyrie are both what the kids would say is a problem on the court. It's really one or the other. When one doesn't do it, the other does, and it's worked. And it's worked enough that they've actually had a, dare I say the word, codependent relationship on the court, where it's actually, they've actually needed each other kind of to lift each other up most of the time. I mean,
like a symbiotic relationship.
Symbiotic might be a little bit better, but I think it's really one of them has just, obviously Luka was number 3 and is the only remaining of the top 15 MVP candidates this year that is that is currently in the playoffs. That it's interesting to see just how much of a high-level player Luka has become. And again, there's always been questions about his really wantedness, his wanting to do some of this, because he turns it on very quickly. And he's also had every injury known to mankind, by the way.
Well, that's true, Rabbi. But I mean, he has found the Mavericks have finally put the right team around him.
It took a lot, though.
I mean, yeah. I mean, they made some really good moves down the stretch. Like I said, talking about getting Gapper, talking about getting Washington, Jones elevating up his role, other guys stepping up. But to me, I mean, Luka's really enjoyed playing with these guys. But the big key, I think, for the success of the Mavericks so far this year is that Kyrie has finally accepted that it's okay to be Robin to someone else's Batman. He doesn't have to, take over, be the man and dominate everything. I mean, it's going to sound strange coming out of my mouth, and Anthony will probably be shocked at this considering the way we've treated Kyrie over the years, but there's been some real growth and maturity from Kyrie in terms of the way his perspective on how his role on this team, how he fits, and what is required of him in order for the Mavs to be accessible. And you talk about, guys, you wonder if a guy who's been as mercurial as he has, both on and off the court, will buy into the role that's envisioned for him. He's bought in and wholeheartedly. I mean, I listened to his post-game comments on Inside the NBA last night, and I'm listening to him talk, and I'm like, that doesn't sound like the Kyrie we saw as a youngster in Cleveland, as a diva in Boston, as a head case in Brooklyn. He sounds like a veteran leader on a playoff team who knows what his role is, as high level as it is, and what he needs to do to raise up his team, be productive, and be a good partner to the obvious and clear-cut alpha of that team.
Yeah, without question, his maturity this season has definitely been a key factor in the Mavericks. In the Mavericks results this year. And that was one of the questions. I mean, think about last summer, the Mavericks really being the only team to offer Kyrie a contract. And we don't know how much that could have been, maybe a humbling point for Kyrie, knowing that everything that happened in Brooklyn in his previous stops, that he could easily be out of the league before we know it. But he is mature. He's accepted his role. But he's played he's played extraordinarily well, and it's refreshing when we talk about Kyrie Irving. It's basketball related, and just that, because the last few years, everything that we spoke about Kyrie Irving has not been basketball related, and it's good to actually get to what we know he's very capable of doing. He's an amazing athlete, and it's been a big contributor to the Mavericks' success.
There's very few players in the NBA that are like, you need to stop and let this guy cook. I think with Kyrie, it could only work for about 4 or 5 people. Shockingly, Kevin Durant wasn't one of them, but Luka Doncic is. So anyway, let's talk about them Wolves. Anthony, how do the Wolves win and make their first ever NBA Finals?
Well, it's got to be the dynamic front court duo of Rudy Gobert and Karl-Anthony Towns replicating what they were able to do in Game 7 against Denver. Think about this. Anthony Edwards did not have a great Game 7 for much of it. And Karl-Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert was somewhat the catalyst offensively, surprisingly, in Gobert's case. So that 20-point comeback in that game, and obviously Minnesota eventually winning. Karl-Anthony Towns finished with 23 points, 12 rebounds on 8 for 13 shooting. Hit a big three-pointer late in that game that kind of really sent Minnesota away. Rudy Gobert, 13 points, 9 rebounds on 3 of 7 shooting. But it was the fact that he was able to get to the foul line. And you look at when he's on the court in that series, Minnesota was a plus 49 when he was on the court. Minus 13 the moment he sat. This is like Joel Embiid territory where you don't want to sit him because everything just goes south the moment he has to sit for more than a minute at a time. But when you look at it too, only a handful of players to be able to draw more fouls in 100% per 100 possessions. Joel Embiid, I just mentioned, Jalen Brunson, Luka Doncic, Shai Alexander, and Jason Tatum, and of course, Nikola Jokic. All of these guys had MVP candidates, FYI, this season. So Gobert's ability to draw fouls on the offensive end, even though he's not the greatest free throw shooters, the fact that he puts pressure on, it's his defense and rebounding, that's a big deal. And then you look at Karl-Anthony Towns. By the way, I have to throw this in there. Both has been very criticized and maligned the last few years for a variety of reasons. And the question was always, can they play together? They have actually offset one another on the court. Karl-Anthony Towns is his ability to score. In the last 2 rounds, his defense has actually been pretty good. He's held us on against Jokic. The first round, did a pretty good job guarding Kevin Durant when he needed to. In Game 1, however, And maybe it was a combination of fatigue because they just got off a very tough 7-game series. Maybe it's the adjustment to the high altitude. I mean, playing playing at
I
a high
don't know
intensity
when you
and
go
mile
three.
high.
I don't know if you win 3 games in high altitude. Maybe the altitude has to adjust to you.
You might get a good point, but it wasn't the same. Carnegie Towns was 6 of 20, had a questionable offensive goaltending call at the end of that game. That was definitely could have gone either way if you look at it from this replay. Rudy Gobert didn't really do a whole lot offensively, but it was the number 62, and that's how many points in the paint that Dallas Mavericks were able to get off in game one. That definitely cannot happen when you think about the Dallas Mavericks' willingness to shoot threes from outside and it being more of a perimeter-oriented team. And Minnesota's going to have to tighten that up in the paint. I mean, Gobert's going to have to play like the 4-time defensive player of the year. Granted, he got ridiculed by how he was guarding Nikola Jokic. I mean, it's Nikola Jokic for Peace sake. I mean, he makes Jokic makes a lot of guys look bad, even 4-time defensive player of the year players. Okay, but also Karl Towns gonna have to step it up too. I mean, he's gonna have to shoot better. He's gonna have to defend a lot better too. And there's a 3-headed monster that the rabbi is gonna talk about. That's part of this equation too. The Timberwolves bigs has got to step it up. They've got to play a lot better on both sides of the court, even if it's shooting, but more important, defending and protecting the rim. You cannot allow a team like the Dallas Mavericks, who was a very perimeter offensive team and then plays small at times, to get 62 points in the paint. And it made it look easy sometimes too. I mean, it wasn't just Kyrie Irving. It wasn't just Luka Doncic. It was just like, it was basically a New York City turnstile at times. How they were able to get to the basket at ease. And it was part of the reason why they was able to erase a 4-point deficit late in the game after Anthony Edwards 3-pointer and go on that run that kind of gave them the lead for good.
Mm-hmm. I think also when you play a team like Denver, you have to kind of readjust your style because Nikola Jokic and Luka Doncic are 2 totally different players, I think, in my mind. They both hit triple doubles, but they both do it kind of differently in terms of style, in terms of what they have against you. And one thing I think is interesting about Karl-Anthony Towns is he is a very, very, very used to fouling and playing defense. He is almost always in foul trouble. And when you do that, you're going to need a guy like Naz Reid to kind of spell him out a little bit. And he's the 6th man of the year for a reason. And the series that he just had against Denver, again, he doesn't really play a lot during a lot of these games. You could see him play 22 minutes, 24 minutes. He did play 29 in game 2 of that series. That was a blowout, though. And but what he does is he pretty much gives you a possible second story. Like, you can take Gobert and Towns out of the game for a 5 to 10 minute stretch of game time, and you won't lose a lot because Naz Reid has been able to just ring the bell this year. There were 1, 2, 3 games in the series where he shot over 57% in game 7. He went 4 of 7 from the field and even threw in a 3-pointer in there. It was 4 of 8 from 3-point land in game 2 of the series. And that's one of the reasons why he was the 6th man of the year. He averaged 15 points per year. He's actually gone a little bit low from what he's done, but averaged 15 points per game 13.5 points per game, this year. And again, only doing it in 24 minutes. Also 5 rebounds, decent free throw shooter for a big guy, 73%. And he is a guy who kind of changes the game, unlike other players, and again, doing it for a team as the Minnesota Timberwolves were, who were one of the league's best this year. That's the reason why he was the 6th man of the year. And as we all know, the Naz Reid towel is always one of the biggest things that has helped him out. Got him to stay in Minnesota for a 3-year, $42 million contract. And Anthony, there was a Naz Reid towel that was also shown in the crowd at WrestleMania 40, where you were at that too. So Naz Reid is playing big minutes for a team He's an undrafted guy out of LSU, but he always has the size to be able to make it in the NBA, and he's really been. It is a three-headed monster on this team, and sometimes he pretty much scored his average. He had 15 points in game number 1. He wasn't, but again, the defensive just lapses at the end of the game kind of just sealed the fate of the Minnesota Timberwolves, but that three-headed monster just continues on the scoring pace. I see this being a very long series between Minnesota and Dallas. On the other side, I think Derek Lively, who should have been NBA All-First team this year, in my opinion, did get the second team for a 50-win Dallas team, but he's one of the reasons why the Mavericks are where they are. Picked 12th, but technically picked with the 10th pick in the draft. That was the Knicks pick, by the way. Not bitter at all. But Lively averaged 8.8 points, 6.9 rebounds, and 1.4 blocks in 55 games this year. Shot almost 75% from the floor, and really developed so quickly that in a class where under the certain draft status, there were a lot of players who had to probably go G League first. Lively actually is a rotation guy, and even though Daniel Gafford is the guy that will start the game, Lively is the guy you probably want to finish the game right now out there, and he's getting the lion's share of the minutes afterwards. Now, this postseason, he's doing pretty much exactly what he did in the regular season: 8.3 points, 7 rebounds, 1.3 assists. Coming off the bench, going into the Minnesota series, he has a plus 87 plus minus. There is only one person in the history of the NBA that's had a better plus minus for a rookie during a postseason run. It's Manu Ginobili, who had plus 191 in his postseason run, which is freaking insane. But even just doing that, coming off the bench, is one of the reasons why he was, again, another small, under-the-radar pick. Obviously, he was a top 10 pick, but we know that he was a project, and the Mavericks have worked that project very well. He actually stepped up in the free throw line in that series, by the way. He shot 66.7%, even though he's usually a 50% free throw shooter. So Derek Lively II is going to be one of the guys who you're going to need to see on the court, making a consistent effort, just keeping up that stat sheet stuffer type of play in this conference finals. And he's not going to be your consistent third scorer, but I think he's really going to be the player that's going to possibly flip this series for Dallas.
He's the second coming of Tyson Chandler, and we all know how integral Chandler was to the Dirk Nowitzki era Mavericks teams that went to 2 finals. He and Gafford have made a really good tandem at the 5 for Dallas, and having I firmly believe it. You gotta have a rim protector, especially in the playoffs.
You need to have
Derek Lively can do. He can protect the rim. I saw him do it at Duke. He's going to continue to do that in the NBA.
You need to have a consistent rim presence at that rim protector spot, and you need to possibly have 2 rim protectors, and that's exactly why Dallas is exactly where they are, the 5 seed and the 3 seed. Who would have thought, especially in that league? All right, I think we have to get to this. So there's no let's do this.
No more dilly-dallying. No more putting it off.
There's no
Band-Aid, Rabbi.
No, it's ripped off. I ripped it off on Monday when I wrote this. There's no worse feeling as a local fan when you have to take what should be the top segment of the week, make an arrow, make a little sad emoji face, and then slide it all the way to the bottom of the rundown as a semi-footnote, but it's a closer. It's a rant, and this is definitely what this is. So this is a rant that serves as a summation of how I feel now about the 23-24 New York Knicks. I did write this before we found out that Jalen Brunson needed surgery on his wrist, but this is still how I feel. Here we go. This is going to be broken up into 3 parts, kind of like a haiku. The bad, the good, and the in-the-middle question. So here we go. Very rarely can a team survive having injuries to 5 members of their playoff rotation to start, not even counting Julius Randle, by the way, and finding themselves making it far. And the Knicks, unfortunately, outlived their shelf life on Sunday with a 130-109 loss to the Indiana Pacers. ending their season at the same place as it was last year, the conference semifinals. While the immediate reaction shows that the Knicks were just succumbed by injury and just didn't have enough, it becomes another loss in the record book. And unfortunately, everyone is not us, and not everyone is going to remember in that record book when they open it up 10 years from now how many players you had injured during your run. The fact of the matter is a team that made deep playoff runs every year will now go on a quarter of a century without a conference finals appearance. To put that in perspective, 4 teams only have had longer droughts: Washington, Charlotte, Sacramento, and New Orleans. Makes me want to be 15 again. Now, get them next year, crowd. Is that really the case? Has a team just made a steady progression year into year and then finally become a champion? You see a lot of teams have to kind of jump off the page in that 1 year to become a champion. You unfortunately have to capitalize when you get the chance. You got to beat up Philly, beat up Milwaukee, beat up Miami, a semi beat up Boston. The Knicks ended up just getting more beat up than them. And you have to hope that the circumstances are the same next year. We'll get back to that. May I remind you, by the way, about the Final Four left. Indiana now has 3 consecutive series victories over the Knicks. Boston has 10 conference finals since the Knicks just had one. Minnesota just won 2 conference finals, just won 2 game 7s on the road. This one, 20 years apart. And Dallas went from tanking last year and saying we don't want to play in the play-in, and thus forbidding the Knicks from getting their pick. They get it this year, by the way, to drafting a top 3 rookie of this year's class and getting to their second conference finals in 3 years. And as Dallas watches, that 10th pick that they would have had last year, or 11th pick, is now a 25th pick in a mediocre draft. Dallas! And now the good. There's probably not been a more likable team in New York in the last decade than with this team. This is a team that has built the most amount of goodwill with fans, enough that fans were chanting Knicks and 8 instead of having the black tie funeral that came from Denver on Sunday night when Minnesota unceremoniously ended their quest to go back-to-back. This team is set up for years to come, with the only 2 real issues going into free agency being Isaiah Hartenstein and OG Anunoby's contracts. And while those 2 will command money, the Knicks are decently under the cap and decently under the second tax bracket that would get them another bit of penalty. So they have the flexibility to afford those 2 if they decide to go that way. But with all of this, the Knicks have gained one thing that you truly need in this league, and that is respect. They're in a position to have respect from other teams, respect from free agents, respect that they're not the laughingstock that they were when they made the 2010 pitch video to LeBron James before LeBron made the decision that was going to take him nowhere near MSG. Do not look it up. That just came out recently. I still haven't seen it. Players are going to want to play with the Knicks. Teams can actually have a sense of rivalry and accomplishment with the Knicks instead of the sadness and shame like kicking a puppy from all of those years. And while the record rightfully says this team only had one more playoff win than they did in 2022-23, I'll take one of those wins from that Philly series in the first round over 4 of those games that they had the year before against Cleveland, who fired their coach, by the way, today. This series proved that the Knicks, when full, ready to go, belonged with the NBA's best. However, I want to ask yourselves a question. I started with this sentence 3 paragraphs ago, and I'll go back to it. Can a team really make a steady progression into a champion? We're going to be on the 6th straight different champion in the last 6 years, and none of them did slowly morph into a champ, but they needed the nuclear button being pushed. The 19 Raptors needed Kawhi, the 20 Lakers needed AD, the 21 Bucks needed Drew Holiday, as we talked about earlier, and the 22 Warriors needed Andrew Wiggins, plus they already had the pedigree going in. And the 23 Nuggets needed a whole new supporting cast, and they really had gone 2 years prior without the true team, i.e. Murray, Jamal, that they had in 2023. Simply put, the questions we'll be asking are many. Do the Knicks need one more shooter, even if it costs you 2 pieces from this special team? What if the Knicks don't make any net gains this offseason and they run it back exactly the way they did that this year? And what would happen if that Knicks team started 15-15 next season? Don't answer that. Rhetorical and obvious. Can a defense recover from watching an opponent shoot 67% against them at a Game 7 at home? We kind of saw in that game. It's better to have your highs to be on the offensive end sometimes than on the defensive one. because this series, the Pacers learned how to defense before the Knicks learned how to consistently offense. And most importantly is Tibbs willing to adjust his Tibbsness. Tom Thibodeau, one of the most disciplined coaches of this league, could only claim one conference final game victory, and that was 13 years ago to his resume. Tibbs played a lot of his guys, and it led to Alec Burks and Precious Achiuwa being fish out of water when they needed more minutes than Tom would have actually ever wanted him to play. In a league where injuries are common, can the Tibbs theory of rather having a guy play 43 to 44 minutes instead of two guys being able to play 25 to 35 actually work? Before I go, let me compare Tibbs to somebody who will be in the Hall of Fame of two franchises, New York Giants great coach Tom Coughlin. When he softened up from the if you're 5 minutes early, you're on time coach, and he became a little more human, it got him 2 Lombardi trophies. Tom might need to make the final transformation from becoming a great coach to becoming an all-time one in this area by needing to make a tweak or two in his systems. Will he change? Will the Knicks change? Needless to say, it might be needed because another conference semifinals loss in 2025 will not be tolerated as much as it was in 2024. Rant over. Anthony?
Well, I'll say this. And I am a lifelong Knicks fan, obviously. So I've been through the highs and the lows. And let's not forget, when the Knicks made the conference finals in 1999, they had lost in the second round of playoffs 4 straight years. So they've had their moments when they knocked on the door, and it took them a while before they finally actually got to the conference final. But that's besides the point. This team overachieved for everything that it went through with the injuries. We never got the chance to see this team 100% because Julius Randle was lost back in January, did not play again. Bojan Bogdanovic just basically had his leg rolled up on a scramble for a loose ball, and he was done. And then you talked about the wear and tear. Really, OG Anunoby was the only one that suffered an injury you could really contribute to wear and tear. That was the hamstring. But when you look at this Knicks team and the grit, the fight that this team exuberated, it did win a lot of people over. Even the hardcores and Knicks detractors, and there are plenty of them out there. Even had to give this team credit for the fact that they lost in 7 games to an Indiana team that shot the lights out in a game 7, but the fact that they were basically down to 6-7 players and still got to a game 7, even took a 3-2 series lead at one point against this team is it's a heck of an accomplishment. And you mentioned Tom Thibodeau. Sometimes I've been a harsh critic of his. I've known it time and time again that he can be a bit stubbornness, his unwillingness to adjust, and we saw him doing that a little bit in the series when he started Deuce McBride in Game 5 in that series to kind of open things up for Jalen Brunson. And for Game 5, it did work. McBride gave the Knicks some needed outside shooting that led the Knicks to that blowout win. But as a whole, you mentioned, can the team take a slow step up? We just watched the Denver Nuggets. I mean, if you think about this, that team was in the conference finals in 2020, and they had the pieces. They just couldn't get the guys on the court. But you talk about Jamal Murray and Michael Porter's back issues, and then they were able to add some additional pieces like a Jeff Green, like a KCP that they definitely missed this time around, and Bruce Brown that helped them win the championship last year that they didn't have at their disposal this year.
Yeah, they didn't have Brown this year.
When you talk about the Timberwolves' overall depth. But this Knicks team, definitely a fun season. The 6-game first round win over the Sixers in a memorable first round series is definitely the highlight, without question. And there's a lot of positive. Sorry, Jay, but it's a lot to take away from in this season. as far as going into next year. Now, do you stay pat? Do you add some pieces? We don't know because we've seen this before when the Knicks try to stay pat and add a couple of key pieces going to the 2021-22 season. That didn't quite work out so well. So that's going to be a big question mark now. But we saw the emergence of Jalen Brunson without question into an MVP candidate. We saw Dante DiVincenzo coming to his own. We saw a guy like Josh Hart become almost as symbolic to toughness of this Knicks team as we saw Knicks teams in the past. When you think about the Anthony Masons, the Charles Oakleys, and of Nick Lord, that was just all about toughness and grit. And you think about this Knicks team that even to the very end fought until the final whistle. That was something that characterized the city of New York, and which is why this city kind of embraced the Knicks after the Knicks in this run, and why it just felt like a totally different. There's a sense of optimism after that Game 7 loss, when you compared it to what happened in Denver, and the championship and the Nuggets championship reign coming to a shocking end after beating up by 20. It was just a tale of two different cities. And with the Knicks, it's more of optimism that healthy, maybe they can go at it, go deeper into the playoffs, and never go into a deeper run. But it's going to be interesting because this is the first Knicks team that's been good and respectable, but also been has been managed well. Leon Ross has not gotten enough credit for how he's been able to put together a decent roster, but more importantly, do it and not overspending and keeping the Knicks in a respectable position as far as the salary cap is concerned, that we didn't see in the previous 2 decades of New York Knicks basketball, particularly when you think about the ownership and the merry-go-round of, innings and out in the front office. So there's a lot to draw from this season that Knicks fans should be proud of, that can take it to the offseason and next season. That for the first time in a very long time, then New York City has a basketball team that they can actually be excited to look forward to and be proud of.
Yeah. Here's the thing, guys. By the time this series made it to Game 7, the Knicks were a shell of the team that they were even as recently as Game 5. Next man up is a great mantra. We know it's kind of become the latest team sports cliche. And to be fair, the Knicks very much lived it, starting the moment Julius Randle went down in January and continued through each subsequent injury, Bogdanovich, Robinson, Anunoby, Hart, and finally Brunson. But there comes a point where there is no next man, and the Knicks hit that point after Game 5. Now, I appreciate Anunoby attempting to channel his inner Willis Reed in Game 7, but it was obvious that he just couldn't go, and Tibbs saw it as well and pulled him after the first 5 minutes. Look, when your team's identity is built on nonstop energy, intensity, grit, determination, you need healthy bodies to be able to maintain that identity. The key stat attributed to that identity was rebounding. Anthony talked about it. I talked about it, and specifically offensive rebounding, leading to, those second chance points that I said would be the key to the Knicks winning the series against the Pacers. In their 3 wins, they were plus 42 in rebounding overall, plus 14 on the offensive glass, plus 19 in second chance points. Game 5 was the epitome. They were plus 24 in rebounding overall, plus 15 on the offensive glass, plus 18 in second chance points. In their 4 losses, they were minus 33 overall, 0. They were net 0 on the offensive glass, and only plus 3 in second chance points. Look, the Knicks' identity was one that matched up well against Indiana, but you need healthy bodies to be able to defend the team who led all playoff teams in points per game, points per 100 possessions, offensive efficiency, pushes the pace as much as they do, and to still be able to win the battle of the boards that's key on your side. The Knicks just ran out of healthy bodies, guys. The future is bright, though. Starting with the Villanova 3, those guys right there, that's a nucleus that the Knicks need to do everything possible to keep together. what they were able to do going 13-2 right when Anunoby came on board really easily meshed in with, with those remaining guys. The way Hartenstein stepped up, taking on the bigger role, and, what Thibodeau likes to do with the center position, not only not missing a beat in terms of the rebounding and the defense, but maybe improving because Hartenstein is such a good passer. We talked about the Knicks strategy in terms of what centers are supposed to do with offensive rebounds. It'll be interesting to see how they incorporate everybody next year if Hartenstein returns, and he has said he'd like to. If they can keep Anunoby, and how Julius Randle fits in with all that. How does Deuce McBride take the next step up in his development when it would, if everything goes according to plan, he goes back to being that spark plug sixth man off the bench. Can Jalen Brunson replicate, does this become his new norm, or will the league figure him out? I mean, look, you guys know it. I'm a Sixers fan first and foremost. Lived in New York all my life. Spent a large part of my life at Madison Square Garden watching the Knicks. The Knicks and the Sixers play a handful of times every year. So as long as it's not a night where those two teams are going head to head, I'm rooting for the Knicks. I want them to do well. This town and the NBA is better when Madison Square Garden is rocking to the rafters night in and night out, and the Knicks are a contending team. They are a long-time franchise in the biggest media market in the NBA. The league is better off when they are doing well. We had that 1994 vibe going across both locker rooms in the Garden, for the first couple rounds of the playoffs. And it was the energy in the city and the energy around the five boroughs and all across New York City. It was a beautiful thing to see. Knicks fans and Rangers fans don't necessarily overlap a lot. So to see two somewhat different fan bases in the same city, in the same building, being so euphoric and like really buying in and really enjoying it is something we haven't seen at this time of year in both sports in a long time. I think both teams, both tenants of the Garden are set up to be like this for a while longer. Hopefully James Dolan stays out of the way of the decision makers on both for both franchises, so that the Knicks and the Rangers can continue to flourish. You guys should be, as frustrating as it was to see the Knicks go down the way they did, you guys should take pride in the success of the season the Knicks had. Everybody else tanked. Nobody wanted a second seed. The Knicks were like, bring it on. And to me, the personification, we talk about that identity. People say, well, that's Tibbs and all that. And Rabbi, I understand your point about Tibbs, but here's the other thing. These guys, specifically the Villanova three, love playing for Tibbs. They love his style of ball. They love his philosophy.
I understand that. I don't think there's anybody else that could coach this team, by the way. I'm not insulting him in any way.
And it's rare in the NBA where you find the leaders of a team, and it's more than just one, the leaders of this team, the guys who run the locker room, who are the conveyors of the coach's message, the guys who formulate the culture in that locker room are fully on board with it. And to me, as long as they can keep this core together, and to me, as long as bare minimum, they can keep the Villanova three together along with Tibbs, I think you build the right way around them, this team can be successful for a long time. They were fun to watch this year, guys. As much as I hated them, kicking my Sixers to the curb, if you were not when I stepped out of my fandom and stepped in just as one of us covering the series like we do every other NBA series during the playoffs this time of year, if you're a basketball fan, that to me was the epitome of an NBA playoff series.
One of the best I've ever seen, by the way, just to kind of make my opinion on that.
Yeah. By the way, Rabbi, I need to cut you off, but you talked about the energy with the Knicks and the Rangers overlapping. We had two stretches where both teams played 2 games apiece in a 4-day stretch, And I work in Midtown, and I worked around that area. The energy in those 4 days.
Palpable, right?
By the way, the Knicks and Rangers obviously went 4-0 in both those stretches. Just the energy and the vibe when you saw the Knicks starting a playoff series, and 24 hours later, the Rangers starting a playoff series. Then they switched back to a Knicks game. Then they switched back to a Ranger game. And just the fact that you saw, when you walked into the halls at Madison Square Garden, you saw one side, there was Knicks playoff decorations. The other side was the Rangers decorations. And for me, and I've had a chance to be able to go to both Knicks and Ranger games. For the Knicks, it was a regular season game, and for the Rangers, it was the Stadium Classic game, the Stadium Series game in MetLife Stadium, respectively. And when you saw, and to see those two teams and the way they won those games, you felt to yourself, we could be watching something special with these two teams. We don't know if it reached a championship, but it definitely will lead to a season worth talking about for years to come. And in the case of the Knicks, it was a disappointing end, but you're always going to have the crazy finish of game 2 when it seemed like, and I'm sorry, Jay, again, when it seemed like the Sixers was going to even the series, or even game 5 when Tyrese Maxey's miraculous 30-footer in the game 6 where the Sixers battled back from a double-digit deficit to take their own double-digit lead. And the back and forth fourth quarter we saw in that series.
NBA playoff basketball.
And then we saw the 2 games had gotten with the Knicks and the Pacers, and obviously the reemergence of Reggie Miller, the historic Knicks villain, in game 2 of that series. It was just a lot of high points that you could take away from. And yes, there was a capper, Jalen Brunson being named to All NBA second team. A great honor and well deserved. But the 2023-24 Knicks is definitely going to be a team worth memorizing if you are a Knicks fan. I know a lot of people in my generation fawn over those Knicks teams, particularly the 1992 team that pushed Michael Jordan and the Bulls to 7 games, and was a top record team led by Pat Riley that it's going to be on definitely. But this is a memorable season, and hopefully next year the Knicks can take that next step. But they got a lot to do in the offseason, and the offseason just started Sunday night at 12 o'clock midnight. So let's see what happens.
Or Monday morning at 12 o'clock midnight.
Monday morning, I should say.
One more fact to get into this, and I wanted to talk about Jalen Brunson. This kind of shows the how good moves Leon Rose has made so far. Jalen Brunson this year with his salary was paid 26 points going into the year, was the 53rd highest paid player in the NBA. There are players, and by the way, Julius Randle was 48th, but here's the kicker. So there have been rumors out there that Brunson wants to sign an extension this offseason to lock him up in New York. And that would be, and he could wait until 2025, or he could get a 5-year, $270 million contract. But if he signs this offseason, he would have a 4-year, $156 million extension. The first year of that salary, he would be paid $34.9 million a year. That would make him the 34th highest paid player in the NBA as of the adjustment salaries for this season. So considering getting Hartenstein for, I think it was 2 for $20, or maybe a little bit more than that, but it was still it just shows that this team has a lot of value going forward, and that's what makes the flexibility of this team kind of interesting to see, because we all know the NBA gets paid for all the money that they do on the court, but they also get paid for the stuff that happens in that little free agent period as the season ends, because they do hot stove probably better than anybody else does right now, and that should be very interesting to see.
Yep.
All right, for Jay Kaplan and Anthony Strait, I'm Steve Rabinowitz, and thanks for joining us this weekend on the Sports Lines. By the way, one thing I forgot to mention, 2026, Yinzers Unite at the NFL Draft is coming to Pittsburgh, by the way. Jay's going to be insufferable in there. You might as well just go to Pittsburgh.
I'm going to be here with you guys on draft night, you know.
If you want to go to Pittsburgh. Anyway, youtube.com, facebook.com, both the backslash of On the Sports Lines gives you the options to watch us live or on demand. And Jay, you have an X/Twitter post to post.
I do. Our Twitter handle is at ONTH Sportslines, where you will find a link to this show tomorrow morning at some point. We also tend to put up little interesting tidbits of sports information we think is worth your time to check out, and links to stories we think are worth your time to read. I put up a link to a really good story by Marcus Thompson of The Athletic about Caitlin Clark's early season struggles as she adjusts to life in the NBA. I agree with him that she'll figure it out, but it's going to take a minute. So everybody needs to stop panicking. As an aside, I also agree with both Charles Barkley and LeBron James that people need to stop hating on her. She's going to be as good for the WNBA as she was for college basketball, bringing in fans and viewers. I saw it firsthand when I saw her make her first trip to Brooklyn last weekend. A rising star lifts all teams and players. Just enjoy the ride, y'all, and enjoy Thompson's story.
Enjoy the ride, and we'll see you in June. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.